Hi everyone, this video is to go over classroom management um, and the basics. Essentially, classroom management can be anything that helps you manage your classroom. It can be policies and procedures, it could be time, it could be instruction, layout, materials, behavior, anything really that you utilize to help you manage your classroom can be considered or go underneath the umbrella term classroom management. A lot of times these things have to do with strategies to help with student behavior. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on. I know a very common phrase is that classroom management is the tools in your toolbox for when students aren't behaving or when they're not doing what they're supposed to do. What strategies do you use, or what strategies do you use to help with your classroom management? So I'm just going to go over a few of them today, just real quick to give you guys some ideas of things that you can do either to prevent student behavior or to help when students are not meeting your expectations as far as their behaviors go in class. So the first one is to explicitly teach your expectations. Simply put, just teach your students what you expect them to do. If you do this, then a lot of times those small behaviors will be eliminated. You'll still maybe have a few kids that pop up here or there, but if you actually go through with them, like what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be doing it, then 99% of the students or 95% of the students will do what you're asking them to do, and then you'll only have the few students to manage. A good example of this would be if you are having them work independently and you expect them not to be talking, then you need to tell them that they should not be talking during this time, because it is independent work. And so then you might have those one or two students that want to talk still, but the other students know, okay, I'm not supposed to be talking because the teacher told me to. The three strike rule or three strike policy is something that I do in my classroom, so I included it. I did not come up with this, but I think it's really easy to help manage, and I think that anybody can implement it. So the three strike rule, simply put, is that if students don't do what they're asked three times, or if they are not meeting the expectations as far as behaviors go three times, then like each time you say, maybe Johnny is talking, strike one, and you tell him that's strike one. Then you see that Johnny is getting out of his seat, and you've already told them that they should not be moving around the classroom. That's strike two, and so on and so forth. If they get to three strikes, then they serve detention. Essentially, the way that I preface it with them is that they wasted time not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and so they owe me that time later. And so I do before school, after school, during lunch detentions with my students. Now, for the first offense, this is simply 5 minutes where they come in after school, and like if they just, this is their first three strike that they got, they come in after school, maybe for 5 minutes or however long it takes for us just to have a talk, and we talk about things. And a lot of times that will help. And then if they are a frequent flyer, the more three strikes they get, then the longer the detention is after school, up to like three times. And then on the third time, I always hand it over to the principal. And I have already documented or have already gone over, like, here are the three detentions they've served. Here is why. And so the principals, especially if you have a supportive principal, will be more than happy to intervene at that point, because clearly normal interventions are not working for this student, and so they need to be dealt with by them. Hit and runs are simple for students that are maybe just off task or maybe talking while you're instructing, or really anything very simple. You go up to a student, hey, I need you to be on page 38 if they're not where they're supposed to be, and then you walk away. Hey, please stop talking, walk away. So hit and run is where you give them a direction and then you walk away. This also helps a lot with students that maybe want to have a power struggle with you or want to argue with you about it. If you're already gone after you've given the direction, they don't have anybody to argue with. This also kind of helps with the three strike rule. If students really do want to argue back with you, then you can give them a strike for that. Natural consequences is the next tool. And this is really just a reminder, when a student is doing an undesirable behavior, what would be a natural consequence for them in the real world? Or what would they end up having to do if this was outside of a classroom setting? So for example, with the three strike rule, you weren't doing what I asked you 3 times, so you owe me that time after school because you weren't getting your work done during that time. Same thing as if you see kids, I don't know if you guys ever have kids that just kind of sit there, they don't do anything, or they don't finish their work because they're not on task. A natural consequence would be for them to be pulled at a different time where they have to make up that work. So maybe they come in and see me at lunch, or they come in after school, but their natural consequence for that would be that they owe that time. Same if kids are talking and they're not supposed to be. A natural consequence for that would be that they should practice not talking to people by not being around the people that are going to be like talking with them. So to move them, which also leads me into my next tool, which is placement or seating chart is a big thing. So I will be honest, I've had classes in the past that I've never had to give a seating chart to because I've told them that they can handle it, or because of their behavior, I've never had an issue, so they don't get a seating chart. However, seating charts can be very helpful, especially with classes where you feel like there are lots of behavior issues. Just setting them up into places where they're not going to be as much of a behavior issue. Maybe the class clown is at the back of the room, so no one can really see what he's doing or what she's doing. Or maybe, yeah, you have the 2 students that really cannot stop talking to each other. You've talked to them, you've done all of the things, and they still can't figure it out. Maybe you have them on opposite ends of the classroom. And so seating chart can be a good tool to use in those situations. The next one is a tool, and also kind of just a reminder as well. Do not be afraid to contact parents. Sometimes especially as new teachers, it can be very daunting to have to contact parents. However, parents can be a great resource and ally for you. Parents also like to know what's going on in class, and so do not be afraid to contact parents with these behavior issues. And you also don't have to just contact them for behavior issues, but to let them know what is going on in class can be very helpful. It's also very helpful to get them on the same page as you, because through my many years of experience, I've learned that, like, if you don't tell the parents about it, if it was a big enough behavior, chances are the kids are going to go home and they're going to tell their parents a story that doesn't paint you in the best light, and it probably isn't the truth. But then I know several colleagues actually that have had situations where a kid will go home, tell parents something, and then the parent will like reach out and be upset with the teacher, when in fact, like, most of what the student said was not true. So do not be afraid to utilize parents or guardians and get them on your side, and also to be able to help with those behaviors, because ultimately both of you guys really want this student to be successful in your class. Documentation can also help with this. Basically, if you see a student doing a behavior routinely, documenting when it happens, why it happens, all of those things can really help, especially if there needs to be a behavior plan put into place. The next thing is conferencing with the student, which seems small, and you probably naturally do this, but make it a point to pull a student if you start to see them doing something that you don't think they should be doing in your class. This doesn't have to be right in the moment, although the sooner the better. However, I know if you're up in class lecturing and a student is um, over in the corner, they're talking and not doing what they're supposed to be doing, maybe correct the behavior then, or do a hit and run, but then later when the time permits, when you don't have to stop class to do it, pull them and say, hey, why were you over there talking? And really just have a conversation with them. This will help, especially with students that just maybe were just not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not necessarily frequent flyers. They're not intentionally trying to disrupt class. This can really help because then they become more aware and reflective of, you're right, like I shouldn't have been talking, and here's why I was doing it, but I won't do it again. You guys can have that really nice conversation with each other. The next one is kind of just a reminder, and has several like mini facets within it, but set them up for success. I believe that students, especially at the secondary level, should have or be in control of their own choices and should take a lot of responsibility for their behaviors. But there are some things that we can do as teachers to help eliminate some of their behaviors. For example, if you have a student who is very hyperactive and has a lot of energy, asking them to sit through a 45-minute lecture and not talk would not be good for them. That would be very hard for them to do. And so maybe in that instance, you create a system for them to do some sort of moving around, whatever that looks like. Or maybe you do brain breaks with that class because you know there's a couple kids in that class that they just can't sit for that long. And to be honest, who really, even adults can sit for 45 minutes straight and just not get bored or zone out or get disengaged at some point. So things like that can really help them with success. Or maybe, where you placing them away from people that are going to be distracting, because the student wants to do well, but they just cannot, they do not have that self-control at that point in time. So putting them away from them can help them as well. Don't put them right next to their friend and then tell them they should not be talking. The next one is bell to bell. So a lot of times we, as teachers in our planning, we try to plan for the whole class period. So that's kind of what this goes over. But there are some times where there's more like idle time, or we finish the lesson and we have like 5 minutes left of class. And so kids are just kind of sitting around. Whenever there's any time where kids have that idle time, they don't necessarily know what the expectations are, or like they're kind of doing nothing so that they can get bored by doing that. That's when we see behaviors start to pop up. And so bell to bell doesn't really mean like you have to teach bell to bell and be very strict about it. It just means to be purposeful about the time and how you're utilizing it. And also to put things into place. Like if students get finished with their work early, what do they do when they're done? Having like maybe a list of choices that they can go and do, so they're doing, not just sitting there and not doing anything, and then causing distractions for other students. At the end of the day, or at the end of the hour, if you're done with the lesson and you have 5 minutes left, maybe throw in an exit ticket, or have them do something where they're not just sitting there, because that's when you'll start to see behaviors. Classroom setup and how you set up your classroom can be very important. And so this also goes into like desks versus tables. It goes into where the materials are that they'll need to get, but strategically placing them around the room so there's less, or there's a better flow, can also be very helpful with behaviors. If you're asking students to get like folders or get materials, but it's in a cramped area and they're all trying to get them at the same time, then like that can lead to some behaviors as well. And then the last thing is just champs. And I added this in here because my district has us do champs. And essentially it's just an acronym that helps you remember to go over these things with kids when you're doing activities. So C is conversation. H is help. How do you get help? Activity is what you're doing. Movement is where you should be or how you should be moving. P is participation, and S is success. So how students know that they will be successful.